This material is Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism by Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc. This book is often referred to as the Big Book by members of the AA community. The nickname Big Book stems from the first edition of the book, which was printed on the thickest paper available and had large margins requiring more pages. The first edition of this book was published in 1939 and has seen 4 revisions thus far. The Big Book lays out the steps an alcoholic must take if they wish to get sober. In order to eliminate any barriers a person may have before being ready to take the steps laid out, there are 5 chapters purposely laid in order so that an individual can identify with other alcoholics and see if they are ready to take the steps necessary to get sober. We are first introduced to the doctor's opinion, a section set out to show current AA members the struggle AA's founder went through when seeking treatment in the 1930s. Dr. William D. Silkworth wrote a letter stating that the Big Book works in treating alcoholics, even though he himself thought Bill W. was an impossible case to treat. Who is Bill W.? The next chapter tells his story, much like an AA member would at a meeting, and it is here that we are first introduced to the founding father of Alcoholics Anonymous. The book then goes on to talk about the solution AA has to offer the suffering alcoholic, and specifically addresses agnostics in its own chapter. The rest of the book is left to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and chapters on how to handle life now that you are sober, including jobs and family. It concludes with personal stories from over 40 recovered alcoholics. The next material is 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, published by Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc. This book is often referred to as the 12 and 12 by members of the AA community. The book was co-written by Bill W. and Bob S., the doctor featured in The Doctor's Opinion from the Big Book. This book is less of a how-to-get-sober guide, and instead shows the inner workings of the Alcoholics Anonymous Fellowship and how it has successfully run for over 50 years. One of the more miraculous things in the AA Fellowship is the resistance to changing the language in any of the literature. Much like the Big Book, the 12 and 12 has seen its share of revisions, but it is almost solely in the forward section of the books. There exists a strong unity with AA's founder Bill W., and since the literature was written by him during AA's creation, it has not, and most likely will not be changed. The phrase, "if it isn't broke, don't fix it," is a great example of how members regard the literature. In 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, the 12 steps individuals should take if they wish to get and stay sober are laid out. It is then followed by the 12 traditions that govern AA meetings and the fellowship. In both sections, the step or tradition is listed, along with a chapter explaining its importance within the community, sometimes with examples from personal experience. While it may sound similar to the section from the Big Book that discusses the 12 steps to getting sober, the 12 and 12 focuses more on the creation and importance of the steps within the community, rather than the actions an individual should take to complete them. For those who wish to study 12-step programs and how they have been and will continue to be successful, this is a go-to book. One of the most important things when getting sober is identifying and establishing a connection with a higher power. Addicts and alcoholics often refer to a God-sized hole they have had in them their entire lives. They have spent countless years trying to fill this hole with friends, partners, money, adrenaline rushes, booze, and drugs. But what they all find out when getting sober is that only a higher power can fill that hole. Alcoholics and addicts suffer from a spiritual malady, and that is why Came to Believe was created. As with the other AA literature, it was published by Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc. Its goal is to show the spiritual adventure of AA as experienced by individual members. Unlike the previous books, this book came to fruition from member feedback. Unfortunately, Bill W. passed away a few years before it was published, and was unable to provide a foreword for the book. In order to include Bill W. in the material, quotes from him regarding spirituality are included at the beginning of each chapter. One in particular highlights the importance of creating a book that shows varying levels of spirituality for all AA members. Bill W. is quoted in stating, "Our concepts of a higher power and God, as we understand him, afford everyone a nearly unlimited choice of spiritual belief and action. Since the third step in getting sober revolves solely around finding a higher power to turn your life over to, the path towards spirituality is of great importance to anyone wishing to recover. This material is not only a great addition to recovery-based materials in your library, but also as a spiritual material, showcasing the various ways in which individuals see God as they understand him." In a culture where drinking is utilized as a social icebreaker, from hanging out with new friends to professional networking, it can be challenging for a recovering alcoholic, or for someone who simply chooses not to drink, to navigate these social situations. Living Sober was created to fill a gap in the literature and answer questions from recovering alcoholics about how exactly they were supposed to survive in a world that puts so much emphasis on drinking. Some examples of questions people may have been provided in the contents of this book. They are things like, what do I say and do at a drinking party? How do I explain to people why I'm not drinking now? Should I seek professional help? These may seem trivial to those not affected by addiction, but they can be the most important thing for a newcomer to figure out so that they can survive sober in their day-to-day life. This book was also published by Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc. in the year 1975, and was last revised in 2012 so that it stayed up to date with topics relevant to today's sober people. The book does not stop at ways to handle awkward interactions at drinking parties, but also discusses how to start believing in yourself again and build up your confidence, something that addicts and alcoholics coming into the AA halls may have little of. I'd like to share an excerpt from the first page of the book. It states, "Here we tell you only some methods we have used for living without drinking. You are welcome to all of them, whether you are interested in Alcoholics Anonymous or not. Our drinking was connected with many habits, big and little. Some of them were thinking habits, or things we felt inside ourselves. Others were doing habits, things we did, actions we took." In this paragraph, we see the openness of AA to helping others who, too, struggle with not drinking, whether alcoholic or not. This book shares new habits to get into to help the transition from drinking to not drinking, and gives concrete examples of how to navigate sobriety. The last material in today's presentation is Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, A Brief History of AA, also published by Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc. Unlike the other material, Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age was published in 1957 and was actively worked on in collaboration between alcoholics and non-alcoholics during the early years of AA. Bill W. discusses in the book how he and Bob S. worked together to create a program that would work and that could be governed in a way to protect from human error without having a governing body. The book includes discussions from Jesuit Father Edward Dowling and Episcopal priest Dr. Samuel Shoemaker on how they help to shape the spiritual principles all recovering alcoholics function under today. The book also contains notes from an attorney and a psychiatrist, all who were non-alcoholics but chose to help build the community of Alcoholics Anonymous that is still standing today. One of the treasures of this book is that it was written by the people who created Alcoholics Anonymous, and it allows us a glimpse into what the world was like for them 50 years ago, and enlightens us to how far we have come today in treating and helping addicts and alcoholics.